Welcome to the Contrarians, where we are right and you are wrong. I'm Julio.
And I'm Alex. Here on the show, we rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. For the first half of each episode, Contrarians Corner, we trash the fresh red tomatoes and praise the rotten green splotches, making our case any way we can.
The aptly titled Real Talk serves as the second half of each episode. This is where we discuss our true feelings on the movie we're covering. For more information on our podcast and to browse past episodes, you can head over to our website, wearethecontrarians.com.
From there, you can also access our Patreon and merchandise, because capitalism.
If you enjoy our attempts at comedic film discussions, we encourage you to subscribe and leave us a review on whatever podcatcher you use.
If you'd like to reach out to us directly, that's what social media is for. You can find us on most platforms as @ContrarianPrime.
You can also see what we look like if you go to youtube.com/@ContrarianPrime, and you can contact us by email at wearethecontrarians@gmail.com.
I think that covers it.
Then it's time for the podcast. And we are recording for Contrarians Corner for Saving Private Ryan.
Julio, I believe we have come across the movie that's going to break our format and possibly drive off our listeners. This could possibly be the final episode of the Contrarians.
I don't think so. I think we are going to be very, very careful to explain like we used to do. Explain what the show is about.
Well, I mean, our opening bumper kind of lays it out, but yeah.
But I think we need to underline, and I need to, at work, I get a lot of people that fill out applications. It turns out they didn't read the instructions because it was just the first page. And I think that during the intro, there may be a lot of people that were just like, I just want to fast forward to the conversation. So yes, this says Saving Private Ryan, the title. We're going to be talking about Saving Private Ryan. What we do in this show is we take movies and argue against the Rotten Tomatoes score. Saving Private Ryan, wouldn't you know it, is super fresh, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. That means that in this first half of the show, in Contrarians Corner, we're gonna say not so nice things about it. We're gonna nitpick it to death. Look, minor spoiler, minor. Alex and I and our guest, we have a guest joining us. We think very highly of this movie, so just rest easy. When we get to real talk, we will say nice things about Private Ryan, extremely nice things, I believe. But
we've done like highly beloved films before, like Titanic, but that movie's like really easy to make fun of. Exactly. So we got our work cut out for us here today.
Yeah, and I think it also has the respect component, which I think that's going to be key. We're going to make fun of the war, but that doesn't mean that we're in any way attempting to be disrespectful of people who served. Have we done war movies before, Alex?
Probably not, because war movies typically aren't my bag, which we'll talk about more in the second half. But let's have as much fun as we can with this beloved. Beloved is a weird word to use with it too, but this is easily one of the more celebrated Spielberg films. But Julio, as you mentioned, we are not storming the beaches alone. We've got a guest with us today.
Yes. It's been a long road getting him here. I think that we picked the right movie. It was between this or Aliens. And I kind of feel that everybody has done Aliens and not that many people have talked trash about Saving Private Ryan. So maybe this was the right way to go. But here we have Paul from The Countdown. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Julio. Hello, Alex. Hello, Contrarians. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I got in my Jeep and went out to the airbase, and then, as you know, I had gone on a big boat, right? Got on a boat, sailed across the Atlantic, and then over months, and along with you two, and then got in those little tiny boats, and then was being shepherded straight towards my death, stormed the beaches with you, as Alex just said, and then made my way across all of France, all in the hope of finding one man or one needle in a stack of needles, as Captain Miller says. And I couldn't pick or think of two better fellow soldiers to do it with, you two. So thank you for having me on this very auspicious occasion.
You're welcome. Here we are, the three of us, ready to face off the artillery from Film Twitter as they completely misinterpret the purpose of our show and believe that we are serious when we say bad things about Saving Private Ryan. Were you able to bring your typewriter, Paul, or did they make you leave it behind?
I went with the tiny little pencil because that was going to get the job done and weigh a lot less. Yeah.
It's a small one. It's a small
Given
pencil.
I am of similar stature to Jeremy Davies or Upham in this film, it's probably a wise move.
Yes. Alex, I think you said that you hadn't watched Saving Private Ryan since it came out. Is that right?
Oh, wow.
I have watched this movie one time in my life. I watched it my freshman year of high school on VHS at Ben Malenfant's house because he was telling me how cool this sniper scene was. And there's one thing about this movie I didn't remember. I remembered everything else about it. And it's not a movie that I ever was drawn back to visiting because it is just so fucking harrowing and moving and just heavy. And we'll talk about in the second half kind of my relationship with war movies and how they're not necessarily the ones I visit the most. So this was the first time viewing as an adult. And, the first time, even as a kid, when my friend, my buddy was kind of drawn to the violence of it. Because, when you're younger, some of the ramifications don't hit you as hard. I still was like, oh, God. And then I was also like, man, Matt Damon's not worth all this.
You were Ryben. Okay. Paul, I think that you're probably the complete opposite, being how it's widely known that you love this movie. So does that mean that this is kind of like a regular rewatch, or do you only bring it up for special occasions?
Probably fair to say that I'm not the biggest rewatcher of films in the world. There's so much new content being released all the time that I'm trying to stay across the things that appeal to me. And unlike Alex, war films absolutely fall into that category. I do enjoy a good war film or try to find those good ones that exist among all the pretty average ones that are out there. So if I have a choice between rewatching a film and watching something new, generally I'm going to choose watching something new. Saving Private Ryan, though, would be one of those exceptions that I do trot it out fairly regularly. I got the 4K a couple of years ago. This is the second time I've watched it. Watched it when I first bought it, watched it then. I've owned it on everything. I had it on Blu-ray. I had it on DVD before that. Whatever special DVD. I think maybe the one, I don't know if yours is the Blu-ray you showed on Twitter there.
DVD.
Yeah, I had that one or something similar to it, at least the Australian version or Region 4 version. And yeah, I would watch this film at least once every 3 to 4 years. Kind of like the Olympics, I think. Every so often, I get moved to feel like, geez, I want to feel like less of a man and amazed by what people went through at that particular period. What is it now? 80 years ago. So yeah.
This was a double VHSer, if I remember correctly. It was like Titanic. It came with the 2 VHSs in the box.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to be. It's almost 3 hours, right?
Yeah, 170 minutes.
And that's before you have the Steven Spielberg post-credits end scene. I don't know if you guys had that when you watched it, but I let the credits roll all the way to the end because I was recovering from the ending. And then I had forgotten, or maybe I never knew, that when the credits are over, Steven Spielberg shows up and he's basically tells you about why he made the movie and kind of makes a pitch.
I thought you were joking that he was going to put together the Avengers, but I didn't realize this was a real thing.
Get you ready for World War III. He tells you about the it's like 5 minutes or something, but he tells you about the Veterans Museum, I think, the D-Day Museum, and you should support it and everything. And I was like, well, what is this? What happens next? But no, that was it. After that, it's over. And then the special features on DVD, I think, let you play it by itself. But the clip starts with him saying, well, now that you finished Saving Private Ryan, so it's meant to play at the end, which is like, yeah.
That sounds like you beat a video game or something. You've made it.
You survived. You're still here.
So Paul watched it in the 4K Ultra Deluxe Blu-ray. Alex, how did you watch it? Because I'm assuming you don't own it.
I do not. May change after this viewing, but it is on for the next week, Amazon Prime here in the States, and it's the 4K version of it. So I saw it in its complete high definition glory. I saw Paul Giamatti every pore on his face perfectly.
If you look at our Twitter account, I posted the DVD that I watched. I knew I owned Saving Private Ryan, so I had to look through it, and I was like, oh, there it is. It's not Blu-ray. Much like you, Alex, I think that's going to change after we finish this episode. I'm just going to upgrade, but it's still, I mean, it's good quality. It wasn't scratched, and it had that Spielberg introduction at the end, so I think I won. out of the three of us because I had that extra feature. But anyway, I think we are ready for quotes, Alex, unless you feel like it's necessary to add just another disclaimer for anybody that just skipped all the way to right before Contrarians Corner.
All that for a general? One man?
A lot of that going around.
So 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. This bad boy got nominated for a whole slew of awards to varying degrees of success, which, oh boy, we're definitely going to talk about in the second half. 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, Julio. And I remember as a kid, I was a freshman in high school in 2001. So it was a few years before I came back around to this. But I remember as a little kid, like a 10-year-old, whenever this came out, like the impact that it made. And it's not just like, retrospective reviews that are that high. I'm sure there's a lot of contemporary ones too praising it. So Julio, which ones did you pull for us?
All right, we got a few fresh tomatoes from the Rotten Tomatoes website. It's almost 200 reviews, maybe. So here's a handful. For the rare rotten quotes, stick around for real talk, because that's when we'll bring them out and question them. But here we're going to start with Dave Kerr from the New York Daily News, who says, Saving Private Ryan is Steven Spielberg's best war film and one of the 2 or 3 best movies the director has made. Which got me thinking, what are his other war films? War Horse, for sure, which I haven't seen, but you're a big fan, right, Alex?
No. What do you consider Munich?
That's more like a spy movie, right?
Thriller. Yeah. 1941.
1941, I think that's his malign comedy.
War of the Worlds?
War.
It's in the title.
Yeah. I don't know that the bar was high as far as like what is going to be Spielberg's best war film. So that is faint praise. Now, as far as the best 2 or 3 movies that he's ever made.
What they're probably including in that is Schindler's List, honestly.
But that's not a war movie.
No, it's not.
There's no combat.
But okay.
There's no people screaming unintelligibly for 20 minutes while explosions happen. Speaking of explosions, Mike Massey from Gone with the Twins says the opening moments on Omaha Beach are surely the most memorable of the entire film, which might be a problem if that's how your movie opens. Did he peak with Omaha
opening
Beach?
Moments? That shit takes up the first 30 minutes of the film.
So, long moments. I think that is kind of a universal opinion. Everybody, whether they like or hate Saving Private Ryan, will always bring up Omaha Beach, that sequence, as like, well, let's all agree on this. Yeah. And the thing that doesn't get brought up as much is that, yes, if that is great, what does it say that there's still like 2 hours of movie after that where you have to hope for it to reach that peak again, and it doesn't. I mean, that is a problem. Next, Philip Martin from Arkansas Democrat Gazette. The landing on Omaha Beach should be shown in every high school classroom in America. This movie was rated R, I think, for very good reason. Mm-hmm. Paul, how lax are they about violence being shown to high schoolers in Australia?
I think we have a rating here, which is basically the equivalent of PG-13. That is the limit for high school films, as far as I'm aware, and it's less than that PG for primary school films. So,
how do you think the Australian government would feel about showing Saving Private Ryan to high schoolers?
Yeah, I don't think we don't generally have this huge drive to push everyone into the army. We have adverts on TV, join the army, make a career, that type of thing. I don't know if they want to go against the budget they spend on those advertisements by showing this film, or at least the first 35 minutes of it in school.
Join the American army. It's even worse. Alex, your sister, who's been on the show before, is a teacher. Do you think that how do you think she would feel about showing this, not to her students, because now she teaches to little ones, but just maybe older students? Is this something that would fly in America, even America today?
Well, not to break into real talk, but I think the sentiment of celebrating war heroes is a little bit different in this country now than it was back in World War II era, and even when this movie came out. So I'm not sure. I can tell you from personal testimony, they showed us The Patriot when we were learning about like the Revolutionary War in school.
Wow.
Yeah. And everyone cheered when the dude's head got blown off by a cannonball.
And we're going to close with Marty Hapes from Movie Habit, who says simply, the standard has been raised.
Nice.
I definitely remember the shift. Much like you always talk about Pulp Fiction and Pulp Fiction imitators, Alex. And I remember Saving Private Ryan came out, and then we kind of had this wave of war movies that seemed to be trying to like outdo themselves with the gore and the realistic depiction of war. And I think in a way we can blame Steven Spielberg for that. It's like, yes, he raised the standard, maybe a little too high. Maybe we didn't need to go in that direction. But we shall discuss all of this as we go into Contrarians Corner and then in Real Talk. So, Alex, let's go to Contrarians Corner.
War educates the senses, calls into action the will, perfects the physical constitution, brings men into such swift and close collision in critical moments that man measures man.
Released on July 24th of 1998, Steven Spielberg directed, penned by Robert Rodat. The movie begins with like a present day visiting of an old gentleman who we don't really know who he is, but he's at the cemetery in Arlington, military memorial cemetery there, and falls to his knees, grief-stricken, stares longingly. If you wonder who this guy is and why he's important, in name you will know, but he doesn't show up until 2 hours into the movie. So he's, I guess, recounting a tale that he just kind of imagined. But
Can I ask though? Yeah, can I ask? Because here is, if you want to be technical, a fairly significant fault in the film.
Yes.
Because the film, the language of the film, the way it cuts, the shots they have of Miller throughout the movie, zooming in on his eyes, exact same shot or framing of this elderly gentleman. The film leads you to believe this is Miller in the present day.
Yeah,
at least it did for me. And
I think it did for everyone. Yes.
Yeah, and so in the Contrarians Corner part of the show, what I'm going to say is that's playing with some pretty loose fucking efforts here. Like, okay, somehow you knew everything that happened in the days before they came across you. I understand that the other survivors might have told him some of the story, but we're getting pretty detailed here. And he was never part of Omaha Beach. He was dropped in. So I don't know. It feels a bit weak.
Yeah, I can buy it in the sense that it takes, they take like, I don't know, like a 30-40 minute break in the movie, which means it's probably hours and hours, in real time before that climatic sequence, right? They find Damon and then it takes forever before we get to the climax. So they're listening to music, they're trading stories. So I do believe that they probably had time to recount the previous days of the search. Right. But it is misdirection. That is not necessary, and I don't like it. I am glad you're the one bringing it up, Paul, because almost as famous as your love for this movie is your hatred for Forrest Gump and for that switch where you're like, how do we know? Why did they switch to the POV from Jenny? And this is it. It was like we start with an old man, and then we're led to believe that he is Tom Hanks, and that is what we are believing for the next 2 hours. So basically it's Spielberg trying to trick us into thinking that Tom Hanks is going to make it all the way to the end. And that is okay for his standard Spielberg bullshit movie, but this is supposed to be a realistic, gritty, like you're not supposed to play with us that way. You're just supposed to give us like what it's like in real life. There's a constant divide between when this movie gets real and then when this movie goes back into Steven Spielberg's storytelling. And this is like from the beginning, that the kind of thing. Now, you guys, I mean, obviously we've seen it before, so you knew, and I'm sure this is one of the things that you remembered, right, Alex?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, you knew that you were watching Matt Damon walk there with his entire entourage, which
One of the more interesting reviews I read that took that aspect of the movie to task, this old man Matt Damon like reflecting as opposed to the movie just being the war movie, is that this did come out in 1998. It came out 1 year after Titanic, and someone implied that the studio or whoever wrote thought they may need like the elderly person in there to add the human touch a la Rose in Titanic.
Right. They needed a Bill Paxton then, kind of like prodding him and just asking the relevant
just asking
questions.
The dumbest questions. So what happened on Normandy? All right. So the movie then takes over the first level of Medal of Honor Frontline. which horrified me to remember as a kid that I got so much glee out of playing those video games. June 6th. 1944, the U.S. Army lands on Omaha Beach as part of the Normandy invasion, incurring major losses against the artillery and machine gun fire of the heavily fortified German forces. Initially dazed by the chaotic battle, 2nd Ranger Battalion Captain John H. Miller takes command of a surviving group and leads a successful infiltration behind German lines to secure victory. This is a lot, man. I can't imagine. I talk about this all the time because I always put my mindset in being in a movie theater and watching a movie opening weekend and trying to process what my emotions would be. And man, this is heavy shit. I guess it is forgiving that following this, we just kind of get 20 minutes of walking and dialogue because it takes a while to recover from what happens here in the opening half hour.
It's a pretty unflinching look at the carnage of war, which kind of like I referenced earlier, seems to promise you a different movie. You do not expect this, like the harsh look at war, to suddenly take a left turn into a quest that doesn't make any sense, right? You think there are movies that have been about war and about how war doesn't make any sense, how war is horrible, like Apocalypse Now. It's always one that I go back to, right? Like that's madness. And we're seeing madness and just gore, like just massacre, destruction. And maybe because we're so many years removed and we can look at it, on a macro level, and we're all like a little more cynical now than I think maybe we were in the late 90s. It also
Confirmed.
Feels a little bit like a war chasing, right? He had Schindler's List, which gave him the critical recognition that he had been missing, right? He was popular. He directed blockbusters. His movies made money and the audiences loved it. But I don't think that critics really took him as seriously as obviously he wanted. And then he made Schindler's List and he got that. He got the Oscar. He got the respect. And I think that he was just chasing that high on the subsequent years. And then this is him. Like, to me, it feels like he's just chasing another Oscar. I'm going to put it all out there and I'm going to use war as an excuse, as my vehicle. And it's not just him. Hanks is chasing another Oscar in this movie, and I'm sure everybody involved was also doing it. So in a way, I am glad that there was a movie like Shakespeare in Love to kind of like make him pump the brakes and not reward like all the pandering.
Too far.
I can't co-sign that. Paul, you think Doug Liman and Oliver Wood are watching this, kind of getting aroused at this concept of this shaky cam, and they're kind of penning this idea, and then they see Matt Damon, they're like, we could do something, we can combine these two things. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. I'm glad though that Spielberg didn't go as far with the shaky cam as Doug Liman would in the first Bourne film, I think is the only one he did, or the first two, whichever one it is. But my qualm, if I'm going to be critical of this opening scene, is not that it runs too long, because frankly, I don't think it does. But it's that in this harrowing, gritty look at, again, it's like Julio said, I haven't served, so I need to be very careful how I speak here, what is purported to be one of the most realistic battle scenes ever depicted on film from multiple veterans who've watched this movie, including Spielberg's own father said the same thing. No one will get as close to this in terms of capturing what it was like. In the middle of all that, Miller sits there. He has his dissociative moment where he's completely overwhelmed. And that seems to run for about 2.5 minutes of screen time. And how he does not cop a bullet or a mortar fire or a grenade or something through him at that particular moment, that's what stretches the bounds of credibility for me.
Yeah, I think that at that time, Miller had watched a rough cut of the movie and he had seen the transition from the old man to his face. So he knew that he wasn't going to die. He was like, oh, that's right. I'm still alive in the future. So I could just sit here while the bullets whiz past me.
I've got plot armor.
Yeah, exactly. One last thing I will say, and that came to mind also, speaking of how this movie raised the bar, raised the standard, I think that there was a time where war movies were more on the level of adventure movies as like kind of fun romps. You could just go and watch a war picture and you were not going to be traumatized for life. Mm-hmm. And now that is gone. I can't fathom anybody making like a war movie that is not grim and gritty. And maybe in Real Talk we'll discuss if that is just the way that it should have always been. But there is something to be said for the fact that Steven Spielberg just demolished the idea, the possibility that there could ever be a war movie that was just for fun, just to to see
the
people.
John Wayne, Clint Eastwood romps of the yesteryear are definitely out the window at this point.
Yes, that's Spielberg just destroying all his predecessors in a way that doesn't leave room for like anything else, which is a little selfish coming from a filmmaker.
You bastard.
Definitely makes Hogan's Heroes seem mooch, you know? The United States Department of War receives communication that 3 of 4 Ryan brothers have been killed in action. The last, James Francis Ryan of the 101st Airborne Division, is listed as missing. General George C. Marshall orders that Ryan be found and sent home to spare his family the loss of all its sons. Miller is tasked with recovering Ryan, and he assembles his a detachment of soldiers, his ragtag team, that are going to accompany him. Mike Horvath, Richard Ribin, Adrian Caparzo, Stanley Mellish, Daniel Jackson, Irwin Wade, and interpreter Upham, who lacks any combat experience. Upham is like Newman or Lutz on 30 Rock. You just get mad when you think about him. Something to call out that in that paragraph there I read, in this portion of the movie, a wild Dennis Farina appears to explain basically war to Tom Hanks, and then fucking Walter White, Hal from Malcolm in the Middle. Malcolm in the Middle hadn't even started yet, so Bryan Cranston at this point would have likely just been considered like an extra. He was not that guy at that point.
I did start to make a note here, like, wow, this film is like stunt casting central. All these people just bob up for one. And I'm like, hang on, but Bryan Cranston wasn't a name yet. Okay, Dennis Farina was, and Ted Danson was. But yeah, maybe some of the people I considered to be big stunt casting names now, back then they weren't.
Yeah, there's 2 other ones we're going to come across in our journey here that like now it's like, ha! But back then it just been like, who?
Yep. Just a guy in a uniform.
So before we get into because I do want to devote some time to our team, as we should, but the mission, is it the tagline?
The mission is a man.
The mission is a man was the tagline, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that means that Tom Sizemore gets the tagline and he gets the titular line in this movie.
He does.
Yep.
But before we get to them, the mission itself, that's where, as I've been hinting at, that guy, I think that's where Steven Spielberg can't help himself, right? He's like, I'm going to make a war movie that's gritty and as realistic as you've ever seen, but I'm also going to make it basically this sort of fairy tale about the government actually caring about like this one woman. And we're going to divert resources to spare her extra heartbreak. That is something that I would expect in a Steven Spielberg movie. That is not something that we expect in the really harrowing World War II epic that he was telling in the first 30 minutes. It's such a left turn, and I think it's gotten worse with age. Like for me, like, you know, now that I'm older, I'm even less likely to believe that the government, the American government, any government would have that kind of meeting where Bryan Cranston is huddling with like all the other chiefs of staff and everybody, and they're like, what can we do to make this woman's life easier? Impossible. We can't agree on anything in this country now. Certainly not like 50 years ago, whatever. It's just, I can't imagine that would be considered a priority for them. You know, at that point, they're like, how do we kill Hitler? And that's where everything was going. And Steven Spielberg is asking me to buy that that's what sets the rest of the movie in motion. If I don't buy it, I am Ribin. And the problem is that Ribin, you know, if Ribin at least got some vindication at the end of the movie where somebody tells him you were right,
yeah,
right, that doesn't make sense, but that doesn't happen. Did you guys have that problem too? When like you're watching it happen, you're like, this is bullshit. This would never happen.
You're kind of dancing around a subject that was more embedded in allegedly the initial script of the movie that we'll circle back to in the second half.
Ooh.
So you got that to look forward to. All right, Julio, you said let's run down our team here, and I agree with that. A murderer's row here. We got Edward Burns as Richard Ribin, Jeremy Davies as Upham, Vin Diesel as Adrian Caparzo. Again, Vin Diesel is not Vin Diesel at this point in time,
Okay,
but watching it now, yeah, it's It's wild. Adam Goldberg, who we've had on the Contrarians before, Dazed and Confused. Stanley Mellish. Barry Pepper as Daniel Jackson.
Battlefield Earth.
Oh, you're right. I was trying to remember what I remember him from. And then the man, the myth, the legend, everyone's favorite, Giovanni Ribisi as Irvin Wade in a very inappropriate way. When he first appeared on the screen, I went, Gio! Because I was excited to see Giovanni Ribisi.
God, he's in such distress. when you see him.
It's so bad. It's so hard to watch. But not to be outdone, I saved this man for last. As Mike Horvath, Miller's longtime friend and second in command, we have Tom Sizemore returns to Contrarians.
Jack Scagnetti.
Jack Scagnetti. Scagnetti's dead. You want to talk about a timestamp. My God. Wyatt Earp, Natural Born Killers, Strange Days, Devil in a Blue Dress, Heat, The Relic, Saving Private Ryan, Enemy of the State. Tom Sizemore, I think, ages the opposite of what we were saying about like seeing like Bryan Cranston and Paul Giamatti in this, of like, oh God, it's Tom Sizemore. Because in the decades that followed this movie, you know, he had his demons and whatnot, and also was allegedly like difficult to work with. But it's amazing to think that he was sharing the screen and arguably outshining people like Tom Hanks in this movie, that he was like sharing billing with Tom Hanks at one point in time for a movie that got nominated for Best Picture. I don't know. That might just be me. Did either of y'all have that like, oh God, it's Tom Sizemore?
Yeah, 90s Tom Sizemore is a very different beast than post-90s Tom Sizemore. You're 100% right, Alex. And I think this, you said it's a timestamp, it's probably also the marker of where it all starts to go downhill, because you can tell, I'm looking at Tom Sizemore going, don't reckon there's too many soldiers of your weight running around in the middle of World War II with all the rations that you're on. So you can tell it's just on the cusp there, unfortunately for him. But he was one of my favorite actors through the 90s. I loved him, and he's obviously, sorry, we're meant to be critiquing, but he's very good in this movie too.
Maybe I should go up the middle, sir.
The way you run, I don't think so.
Maybe I should go left, sir.
Maybe you should shut up.
Well, I mean, you can praise him and also critique Spielberg for miscasting him. I think this might be one of my hottest takes. I think he should have played Miller. I think that Tom Hanks is miscast. He's a great actor. I think Hanks is amazing. I love him, but he can't play the grizzled captain that everybody's afraid of, that everybody makes jokes about, like, oh, does he even have a mother? Like, I don't buy him as that character. He's not the type.
Are they meant to be afraid of him? I didn't think they were afraid of him. I thought they were like, he was enigmatic, like they respected him.
But there's comments that they make, like the one, I guess Captain doesn't even have a mother, and then there's
but it's like the joking way.
Yeah. I mean, I think they respect him, but I think that he is rough. I think that later on, just skipping ahead a little bit, like 3 hours of movie, with the big revelation that he's a school teacher is supposed to blow our minds, like everybody's. And I'm like, it's Tom Hanks, of course. He said, like, teacher. Like, he says, like, you know, back home. It's like, everybody's like, of course, that figures. But here it's a big mystery. And I think that if you got that revelation from Tom Sizemore, if Tom Sizemore was Miller and he told you, right, he's like the gruff captain that everybody's kind of like, what's his deal? And he's just, you know, very businesslike and whatever. Then when he reveals that he's a teacher, you'd be like, holy shit, what? And then you can see how war changes people, right? But here, I feel like Tom Hanks in the classroom is pretty similar to Tom Hanks here. I think that that's the problem when you have a cast of like that's that strong, and the person leading that cast, while strong, is not maybe the best suited for that role. And so I think that everybody from Sizemore to Ribisi to even Jeremy Davis being as Jeremy Davis as he can be, I think that everybody outshines Tom Hanks because everybody seems perfectly suited to the role except for him. Alex, you love Tom Hanks. You, unlike Paul, you love Forrest Gump as much as I do. But did it kind of break your heart to see Hanks just straining to play this character that's supposed to be a more realistic representation, I think, of those soldiers, those captains from old war movies?
Oh, he's got the 5 o'clock shadow, so you know he's gruff and grizzled. But he's fucking Tom Hanks. I'm not going to act like, you know, he's not one of the greatest American actors that's ever lived. But what I will say is that this movie is sandwiched. Are you ready for this sandwich here? 1995, we have Toy Story, That Thing You Do, Saving Private Ryan, You've Got Mail, and then in 1999, of course, Toy Story 2. So we got a Toy Story sandwich here where we also have the lovable, likable Tom Hanks in That Thing You Do and You've Got Mail. And then there's this, where I was having a very hard time focusing hearing Woody talk about war in such a very curt fashion. So I think it's not a critique necessarily of Tom Hanks in that role. It's just I know too much. I've seen too much Tom Hanks to, necessarily connect to this immediately. Of course, the way I think of movies, I went even more bleak with his character in this. I just assumed he was an alcoholic. That's why he had the handshakes. And but it's obviously, I think, as any of us on this podcast right now, I would straight up shit my pants in these scenarios they were in. Shaking your hand is the out of a nervous tick is the least of the worries.
I'd have copped the first bullet that went skying through the boats, so I wouldn't have even got off that boat.
Yeah.
So that's his thing, right? Hanks has the handshakes, and then Sergeant Horvath Sizemore, his cute quirk is that he collects dirt from I guess everywhere. Yep. Shows up at the beginning, never pays off.
Also, big chaw. He always puts in a big mound of chaw.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I think that one shot is really just establishing how much of a veteran he is. Here's all the places he's been to and survived.
Yeah.
So that's the instant movie's code of you need to respect this guy. He knows his shit.
Right.
What do you think he was going to do with it, Julio? Become a geologist, like a professor?
He was going to open it and throw it in a German's face.
No, the big reveal at the end is the old man is not Damon. The old man is Horvath. Or Horvath's son, brother. I know he brings the tins and puts them in front of the gravestone.
Right.
It's here you go.
Yeah, that could have worked.
Yeah, just if you're gonna be that way, Spielberg, go be that way all the way. Just lean into it.
If we're gonna lean on or start to question casting, the one guy that didn't work for me, because like you're both describing, contextually, he never played anyone like this ever again or before. He was always romantic comedy guy. Usually in the early versions of mumblecore films. Edward Burns as Ryban, the hard ass, the guy who goes back and is constantly antagonistic and arguing and never goes with the flow. I'm like, come on, look at that face, look at that hair. There's no way that guy is in the war. No way is that, and he's arguably the best soldier of the lot of them. He pulls off everything he tries to do.
He survives.
Yeah, and he survives. Like, what? Edward Burns should be the first person that copped a bullet in that troop.
I never realized until this that it immediately clicked with me. It's like, oh, Lachlan Monroe was trying to look like Edward Burns. That was his whole thing. He was hoping to get the scraps picked up from what was left behind. Back with our team here. The group tracks Ryan to the town of Neuville, Plain, where Caparzo is killed by a German sniper while trying to rescue a young girl. Mourning their friend, the men grow resentful at being forced to risk their lives for one man. They later find James Friedrich Ryan, we'll come back to this, but realize he is the wrong man with a similar name. That evening, the men rest in a chapel where Miller tells Horvath that his hands began uncontrollably shaking after he joined the war. The men travel to a rally point where the 101st Airborne might be after landing off course, where they find scores of wounded and displaced soldiers. Wade admonishes Ryban, Mellish, and Jackson for callously searching through a pile of deceased soldiers' dog tags in front of passing troops, hoping to find Ryan's among them and conclude their mission. Remorseful for ignoring their behavior, Miller shouts for anyone who knows Ryan. One deafened soldier tells him that Ryan was reassigned to defend a vital bridge in the town of Ramel. Okay, a couple things to break down here.
Guest stars galore. Here we go.
Yes. The Vin Diesel scene is one of the things I remembered most from my first viewing because it's just crushing. And it took me years to remember, oh, yeah, that's Vin Diesel. That's the dude from Fast and Furious that happens to. But for a movie that's so rooted in reality and prides itself on being what, as Paul had mentioned, is confirmed by many veterans to be a realistic portrayal of it. There is one part here where Spielberg could not help himself in going into movie territory, in which our sniper, what's his name?
Barry Pepper.
Jackson.
Yes.
Jackson. He shoots the German sniper through the scope of his sniper rifle and it goes through his head. Is that a moment where you go, fuck yeah, Yes, but there's really
Yes.
not any of those elsewhere in this movie because it feels very, that's something that happened with Die Hard or some shit like that. So if that throws you off, you don't have much time to recover watching this in 2024 because then we stumble across Wild Paul Giamatti, and then more so, who would not have been anyone to be like that guy back in 1998. But Nathan Fillion is the original Private Ryan that they find.
Yes.
What was his superhero? Dr. Horrible? What was the musical?
Captain Hammer.
Yes. Okay. Dr. Horrible was Neil Patrick Harris, right?
Yes. Yeah. This is a Captain Miller, Captain Hammer crossover we were all waiting for.
And then Ted Danson's in there too.
What does that mean my brothers are okay?
Yeah, I'm sure they're fine.
Are you sure that they're okay, though?
We're looking for a different Private Ryan. This is just a big foul up.
The Nathan Fillion scene, that's just like a comedic set piece. It's like it's a weird turn. I understand that there's look, I don't know that anybody could have pulled it off. And maybe Spielberg should have recognized that and maybe he said, okay, we'll skip this scene or, stage it a different way because you're doing some heavy shit. Like they're going to tell this guy that his brothers are dead and then it turns out he's the wrong guy, but he did have brothers. So you wreck him, right? Like by the time they walk away from Nathan Fillion, he is a mess. But it is kind of played for laughs. Like there's like the close-ups to the soldiers like Ryben and Mellish. Like
Told you it was a mook or whatever he says.
Yeah. So you get the dramatic close-ups when they're delivering the news to Fillion and everybody's starting to feel bad for Ryan. They're like, oh, well, this guy, right? And Ted Danson is comforting. And then the turn when they realize that it's the wrong Ryan. And then you get the close-ups to Tom Hanks. And those are the ones that are like comedy. Like Hanks is like, never mind, gotta go. You're fine. But are my brothers okay? I'm sure they're fine. And he walks away. It's such a weird mix of tones that, and I don't think, like I said, I don't know that anybody could pull it off. Maybe you can't just do this type of scene where you go in that heavy and then you have this sort of mix up that is, I mean, we just did a whole summer of Bogdanovich movies, Alex. And this is something that you would find in a Peter Bogdanovich movie. It's that kind of confusion of like, oh, no, never mind. We gave the bad news to the wrong person. That's Three's Company shit. It is more distracting, of course, now that you know who Nathan Fillion is. I think maybe it flies a little easier when it's a nobody, but it's like Nathan Fillion. And it's like, what is that? That guy's a meme today.
I think what they were trying to do there is contrast what the real Ryan, the Ryan they're looking for, is like. So we get the guy who's a blubbering mess the moment that he hears his brothers are gone, and then we get James Francis Ryan's reaction, which is instead of taking the easy ticket out of there, he's like, I don't care. I'm staying here. These are my brothers now.
Right.
So it's really, really highlighting the difference in the character of this man that they have been tasked to save.
I wish we had found that Ryan first. Would have made the movie more interesting.
Well, it would have been shorter.
It would have been shorter too. Paul Giamatti complaining about his ankles. Again, that's just like comedy. It's just being Paul Giamatti being grumpy.
That one is kind of funny because he's legitimately like one of the most celebrated actors of present day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Vin Diesel out of the movie before we even got to know anything about him.
Before he said family even.
Well, at least he died trying to save a family or help a family.
On brand.
Though I did find his death questionable. Like they know that there's enemy troops in this town. They know there's shots being taken. He's just standing up there, and all. I don't know how tall he is. I don't think he's actually that tall.
Don't let him hear you say that.
In open defiance of Miller's orders, Horvath's orders, I thought that these guys were.
We had nothing. We had no insight that was what he was like till that moment in time.
Yep.
So
Ryben. If Ryben had been defiant of the orders because he got into his head that he had to save that girl, I would buy it. But Caparzo has been pretty, I guess, unremarkable up till then. But the idea is that Tom Hanks said, give me the top team. I'm going to take the best of the best with me on this mission. And the best of the best won't follow orders. What gives?
Very good point.
Alex, I do want to call out probably my favorite cameo as it is. And that is somebody that's been on the show before. And every time he shows up, I call out his appearance. Alien Resurrection, The Bone Collector, Leland Orser.
Oh,
Leland Orser.
I have in my notes here Leland in all caps because I knew you would circle back to this. So thank you.
Who is playing their persona at the highest level? Is Jeremy Davis as Jeremy Davis or Leland Orser as Leland Orser? Because it's like they took the dial for their quirks and they just turn it up to 11 in the way that they play their characters here.
The others, they stopped easy enough, okay, though, We were just too damn heavy, you know.
On the way, Miller decides to neutralize a German gun nest they discover against the advice of his own men. And although they are successful, Wade is killed. This is truthfully one of the most intense moments of the movie, I guess is the word I would use. The men prepare to execute a surrendered German soldier in revenge, but Upham intervenes, arguing that they should follow the rules of war. Miller releases a soldier nicknamed Steamboat Willie, ordering that he surrender to the next Allied patrol. Discontent with the mission, Reiben threatens to desert, leading to a standoff between the men that Miller diffuses by revealing his civilian background as a teacher and baseball coach, which he had always refused to disclose. Miller muses that people often guessed his career before he became a soldier, while his men could not, implying that war has changed him, and worries whether he is still the man he was and whether his wife will recognize him. This is the part in the movie where they're all on even playing field now. They're all just men there to do a mission. Steamboat Willie, though, Julio, do you know the significance of that name?
Steamboat Willie, toot toot. Yeah, it's Mickey Mouse, right?
Yeah, it's Mickey Mouse before he was Mickey.
So this is the big. This is where Miller makes mistake after mistake. This is where, in a different movie, he would have been deposed, right? Like Reiben takes over the squad, or maybe even Sizemore takes over because he gets poor Giovanni Ribisi killed, and then he lets a German soldier go. Like there has to be a middle ground. Like if you don't want to kill him because you want to preserve your humanity, maybe you don't just like set him loose so he can rejoin his army and eventually, spoiler, kill you at the end of the movie. Maybe you just, I don't know, you carry him until you can like drop him off with like an actual American squadron there. But did you guys lose a little bit of respect by the way that...
Wait, that is the same soldier that comes back and kills Adam Goldberg and Tom Hanks?
No,
not Goldberg.
Goldberg, which I did think the first time I saw that movie, Alex, so I'm right there with you. No, but he is on the bridge shooting across as Miller's sort of, again, in that sort of half dissociative state, goes straight across the bridge to get the detonator. And he's the one that shoots Miller, which Upham sees from his little spot in that sort of mortar-shelled crater. And that's the reason why he shoots him. Out of all the soldiers that mass surrender, he shoots him.
Right. Okay. He even says his name. He recognizes Upham because, they said his name earlier. Well, did you guys kind of like, if you hadn't already, did you kind of like lose a little bit of a confidence in Captain Miller's ability to complete this mission when he kind of takes his eyes off the ball and he's like, well, you know what? Let's go on this side quest, maybe get a little more experience, loot this radar, let's blow it up. And the trade-off is that they lose their doctor. Man, at the very least, let Ribisi hang back because he's the one that can maybe, he has skills that nobody else in the team has. Yeah. Alex, would you have done what Miller did, or would you have said, no, you guys are right, I'm being outvoted in this group, everybody wants to not do the side quest and just keep going forward to finish the game? Or would you have done what Hanks did?
Oh, come on, man. You can't, I don't know. I wouldn't have made it that far, to be honest with you. One, I would have tried to not get into war. And then two, if I did, man, I exist to be the trope in every Vietnam movie of the kid who's like too happy to be there and gets killed immediately. That's like what I am. Hanks is just a man on a mission. Like he's just lost like all emotion and feeling. That this is like his breakdown here though. Is when he finds himself a moment of like solitude, he just completely breaks down. And
it was literally his Oscar clip. I don't know if you remember.
It was?
Yeah. Right? I don't know if you saw you watched the Oscar. I remember, I'm pretty sure it was like when they announced him, it was him crying, which, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It would have been, if it wasn't that and I was at in the Oscars, then it has to be the clip where he's just explaining that he's a teacher, right? Even though he gets a whole bunch of them. This movie, like the subtitle is "Another Oscar for Hanks, Please," because he every now and then it stops and he'll give us a speech.
Well, I think though that scene why he went off and they tried to take that bunker was of the frustration of we're not going to find Ryan. Ryan's it's over and done with, so we're going to do something.
We might as well accomplish.
We're going to accomplish something, and we've got a chance to do something here, and that's why he doesn't listen to anyone. And the scene also. Therefore, as a result of that, suddenly Reiben isn't just an asshole anymore. he's actually got some valid points. And
Yeah.
so the film sets up him from there as not being just the antagonist is too strong a word, but the difficult guy in the party. And it also shows just how far Mike is willing to go for the captain, because Mike is willing to shoot Reiben at that after all this, even though he will know the captain fucked up here and one of our guys died because of it. So it does a lot, that scene.
Is he willing to shoot Reiben though? Because I
think he
feel
would've.
like Reiben calls his bluff, and Sizemore is just stuck repeating, "I'm gonna shoot
Well,
you."
if the captain said put him down, I think Mike would have shot him.
I mean, it is Tom Sizemore. I believe it from Tom Sizemore.
It's a loose cannon.
Yes. There is this really terrible moment for, I mean, I guess it's not Jeremy Davis's fault necessarily, but it fell on him where the camera swoops in to a close up of him and he goes, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't need that. I think that we're okay.
And that whole scene being blocked from Upham's perspective is a bit like I guess maybe they've gone over budget or whatever else. So we just hang back with Upham the whole time, watch his reactions. And then when he comes running up, that's when we see that Wade's been shot. And
yeah, that's 100% true. It's like, I think the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones or season 2, where like Tyrion goes into battle and he gets knocked out really early on. And so when he wakes up, the battle is done. That's
right.
That's what happens here. They just kept Jeremy Davis in for an extra couple days just to shoot some B-roll of the battle, and then we never see. Poor Ribisi gets shot like off camera. We just see the horrendous aftermath.
The MPAA told him, they sent it back with an NC-17 rating. They're like, this Ribisi death scene, you gotta
too much.
You gotta imply he got shot.
Yeah, please, not America's sweetheart Giovanni Ribisi. We can't see him get shot. We will see him die horribly, but not get shot.
Yeah. Fucked up beyond all recognition, right?
In Ramel, Miller's detachment finds Ryan and informs him of their mission, but Ryan refuses to abandon his post or his fellow soldiers, believing he does not deserve to go home more than anyone else. Horvath convinces Miller that saving Private Ryan might be the only truly decent thing they can accomplish during war. Miller takes command of Ryan's group as the only officer present and prepares the soldiers for a German assault. They're trying to hold this bridge here in Ramel. And for all of the hype, we're 2 hours into the movie at this point, probably like 2:10 because Damon's only around for the third act. And when his reveal, it's like, I wanted him like coming out of smoke, like firing a gun, something. He just kind of shows up. He's he does blow that convoy up, but he I wanted like the sun to shine on him, I wanted the big reveal of Matt Damon's here. I wanted his debut in Interstellar where you're like, oh God, it's Matt Damon. And here it's just like, wait, who is it? Oh, it's Matt Damon.
It's really the way it's shot. It's like a 3-shot, right? The camera's panning as Miller, I think, is meeting everybody, and Damon is in the middle, but the camera never stops on him, and it just kind of comes back. I was like, I get it. I know what you're going for, right? Like it's how they would experience it. They don't know it's, they would do a double take, and then see like, oh, you are the James Ryan. But after the way that we've been introduced to almost every major character in the movie, it is incredibly underwhelming. Just like, oh, well, we just happen to now. It's like, it is Matt Damon. And again, much like with Nathan Fillion, because it's Matt Damon and we know Matt Damon now, is.
But he wasn't that big a name then,
exactly.
Was he? He'd been in a few films.
Exactly.
When was Good Will Hunting?
98?
7
or 8?
Okay.
No, I'm guessing you might be right.
This was, I know that the story is that when they cast him, he was an absolute unknown.
7.
But then by the time that the movie came out, he was Matt Damon, and that was kind of that worked against what Spielberg wanted, because Spielberg wanted somebody that was just like a regular dude. And if that was the case, even when the movie came out, even more so now. That was
yes, because when I think of someone who looks like a normal man, I think of Matt Damon, not one of like the most pretty men that's ever lived.
Now you just see him, like you can't trick me with the camera movements or anything. It's Matt Damon, and especially it's just laughable because he's kind of made a career of showing up late in movies. So yeah, you mentioned Interstellar, but he does those things where he has cameos, whether they're credited or uncredited. So it adds a layer of unintentional comedy, I think, when he shows up, and I was like, of course,
Scotty doesn't know, Julio. Scotty doesn't know.
God bless. Isn't there like a story that Spielberg made the Hanks's crew like go through like a real boot camp, but not Matt Damon?
Yes, that's what I read somewhere too. Yeah,
interesting.
What an asshole.
But yeah, you think of like the Barry Peppers, his reveal scene in this where he's just sniping motherfuckers, and Matt Damon's just like, hey, I'm here. So as they prepare to hold the bridge, and Ramel attempt to, there's a scene that I'm legitimately torn on where I understand that it shows like the banality and like it puts like a human touch on it, but also it feels like it might be like added for like this moment of levity that I don't quite think is appropriate for the scene. And this is a scene in which Tom Hanks like fights with a coffee machine. Like he wants some coffee and he starts shaking it. It's just short of him, you know, having like a big level freak out of like,
flip the table.
Yeah, exactly. And he tries to get coffee, doesn't come out. He shakes the machine, he looks in it, and then he leaves. And I was like, I don't know if I like that or not.
I'll one up you there, Alex, and say the whole next scene where they're listening to Edith Piaf or whatever her name is, and we get Hanks talking about his wife and nope, that one's just for me, and a little bit of Matt Damon, probably in one of his lesser acting moments, I think, telling the story about how his brother was banging some chick who's ugly in the barn and they came in and scared her. And that whole bit,
it's
I'm
more
like,
than a little bit, Paul. It goes on for a while. Yeah. It's funny because it is the Matt Damon Oscar clip, and it is so much lesser than all the Oscar clips everybody else has gotten. Like, all right, kid, we're going to give you 5 minutes to tell the story. This is where we charm them. This is where we show them why we picked you to play Private Ryan. And it's not that he does badly. It's just that the story is nothing. Everybody's gotten these really heavy moments. And Damon is telling this really juvenile story about his brother almost getting laid and them laughing. It doesn't really hit, I think.
It really feels like, and as, you know, this is not exclusive to World War II. This is men through the history of time when they're alone, you know, with each other, and they talk about women and shit like that. You know, there's
it seemed like there was in movie theaters.
It seemed like there was a desire to interject like this guy talk that was, again, similar to the coffee thing. I understand that it's supposed to paint like this image of they're just dudes, you know, and they're here and they're preparing for battle, you know, and
he's like, so tell me about your wife now.
Yeah,
Hanks wants no part of that.
Hanks is the only smart one there. He's like, nope. And he shuts that down. And yeah, so this leads, of course, to them like making sticky bombs and preparing for this battle here. This is the Edward Burns moment of the film, though, as they get down in the trenches, you know, the crater, watching these tanks go by and shit right before literally all hell breaks loose. Edward Burns looks over at Matt Damon and his face says, I'm really going to die for this pretty boy, aren't I? Like, he just has such discontent eyeing Matt Damon up and down. He just kind of gives him the look of like, you're it, huh? Well, shit.
The prettiest two men in the army.
Yeah.
They managed to be there side by side in the trenches.
So yeah, my notes go, I'm going to die for Matt Damon face, tension. Well, this is all very sad. That's how my notes go.
That's it. That's all you can bring yourself to write.
Sticky bombs. Before we get into that, another harrowing stretch. It's bookended with 30 minutes. Like I looked at the time code. So it's 30 minutes in Omaha, an hour and a half of bullshit, and then 30 minutes of defending the bridge. So it's sticky bombs. I think it's funny that the character Captain Miller, Hanks, has to feel, the movie feels a need for him to explain that he's not making this up. He's like, no, it's in the manual. Because it sounds,
look it up.
It sounds like such a Steven Spielberg movie thing, you know, for him to come up with like this special weapon that's going to disable the tanks. Again, you know, going to fantasy land. He's like, no, I swear, it's true. It's in the manual.
But then Spielberg does remember what film he's in or what film he's trying to make, because the first sticky bomb guy lights it too early, doesn't quite make it to the tank, and just explodes into a geyser of gore.
That I had forgotten.
That's like fucking Dr. Manhattan vaporizing shit right there, man.
Yeah, it's I've seen this movie multiple times, and that one I had forgotten. Either I had forgotten or I had never realized that that's what happened. Because, you know, it's all very chaotic. But this time I did clock it. I was like, oh, that was somebody. That was one of them. You know,
there's a lot of violence in this, obviously. But that is like, you know, I talked about the sniper scene earlier being like the 90s action movie moment. This is like seriously like a Tom Savini special effect where they just loaded like a trash bag full of like fake blood and just watch it blow up.
It's a bomb that sticks. It's a sticky bomb. Come up with a better way to knock the tracks off a tank. I'm all ears.
You may have forgotten that, Julio. You know what I didn't forget? What happens next here? Jackson and Horvath are killed, and Upham stands paralyzed with fear as Mellish is stabbed to death. This is a reason why I've never been particularly motivated to revisit this movie, because the Adam Goldberg death is so like burned into my forever presence. It's just, it's so real is the word I would use to describe it. Having not been in battle, but the emotions he goes through, and in his last moment, like pleads with them. Let's talk about this. It's I remember too when I was a kid watching this and how much I hated Upham, and still do. What I didn't remember though is he kind of has a moment of redemption, but in the moment here where Mellish gets killed, I think it's easily one of the, sad is very diminishes the impact here. It's one of the most memorable death scenes I've ever seen in a movie 100%. Because of how real and harrowing it is. I've used the word harrowing like 10 times already for this, but that's the word to describe it.
And I want to circle back to this scene in Real Talk if we can remind me, because I do have a really
we'll definitely
great story about this particular scene.
I will say that the thing that diminishes this scene a little bit, because I agree, it's very effective. It's how could it not be, right? For better or for worse, we spent 2.5 hours with these guys. I think that it could have happened to Mellish. It could have happened to anyone in the squad. It could have even happened to Davis. It's such a horrible way to go, and it's to a character that we've been following. So it was gonna shake us no matter what. And the frustration, right? Because he's right there. He could have saved them. All that. But going back to what Alex said and what you said, Paul, and everything, I think that it's a mistake not to make it 100% clear that this German is a German soldier that we've never seen before. Because the way that wouldn't be a problem.
Too close to Steamboat Willie.
Yes.
He's just bigger.
It wouldn't be a problem if you didn't bring back Steamboat Willie. But because you bring back Steamboat Willie at the end, then it makes you question, wait, so was he also the guy that killed Mellish? Mm-hmm. Because they look similar because they're all grimy.
To be fair, all white people look the same.
Yes. Especially when they're trying to kill each other.
Especially in German uniforms,
yeah. But no, the buzz cut, the uniforms, the grime, it all looks, it's conceivable. They could be the same people. Especially because Spielberg is throughout the movie has been piling on these weird coincidences. So we were like, yeah, it's not, if it was a movie being made by a harder filmmaker, somebody who would not ever in a million years come with that kind of like coincidental storytelling, then it wouldn't even cross my mind. But because it's Steven Spielberg and he's been doing that kind of stuff, then I'm like, it's possible. Maybe it's the same guy. And I think that robs the movie of that scene of some of its power because it confuses you. And instead of focusing on what's happening, I'm trying to figure out who is this guy? Is he the guy? And I've seen this movie multiple times and I still didn't know until today. After I watched the movie, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the internet and really figure it out. So Google autofills it for you. You're like, who killed Mellish? Who killed Captain Miller?
Was it Steamboat? Yeah.
Yeah.
I did the same thing, but in the 4K cut, I could see quite clearly it's not the same guy. However, the one moment then, that is everything you said, Alex, spot on. I 100% agree with. But the one moment that takes me out of that scene is the soldier walks back downstairs and just laughs at Upham, who's cowering there on the stairs. There's no way in a war scenario he doesn't just stab him as well or shoot him in the head as he walks past. No way. You don't leave a live soldier right behind you.
Yeah, it makes it even more confusing because then you're thinking, oh, wait, he spared them because Upham wanted to spare him. When you think that it's Steamboat Willie, you're like, okay, so that's why. It's a mess. Spielberg should have just made it, don't bring Steamboat Willie back. It's just random German soldiers because that's just how war is. Still, Mellish, Adam Goldberg, R.I.P. He did not survive this fight, unlike the fight in Dazed and Confused, which...
He did live to fight another day there.
Yeah.
Steamboat Willie returns and shoots Miller as reinforcements begin to arrive to defeat the Germans. Upham confronts Willie, who attempts to surrender again, and kills him. So Upham, I think... He learned the real rules of war here, sadly, before sending the other surrendering Germans away.
So he didn't learn anything, Alex. The whole point is Steamboat Willie.
He learned that he shouldn't have let him go in the first place.
But then he lets the others go.
Well, that's a bit different. They're now going to be imprisoned, or I don't like their fate. I'll say that much. Whereas this one guy, Steamboat Willie, he was outnumbered literally 6 to 1?
6 to 1.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're just like, go ahead. What's the worst that could happen? Upham and Reiben observe as the mortally wounded Miller tells Ryan to earn the sacrifices that were made to send him home. And then we get one of the most used GIFs in the history of the internet as Matt Damon transforms into elderly Ryan as his fan. And this is important. I realized I misspoke immediately at the beginning, so I'm glad I got to circle back to this and correct myself. I wrongly said that they were at the Arlington National Cemetery. They are not. They're at the Normandy Cemetery in France. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Arlington is in Virginia. I have a family member buried there, in fact. So I apologize for misspeaking on that one. But at the Normandy Cemetery, Ryan expresses that he remembers Miller's words every day, that he lived his life the best he could in hopes that he earned their sacrifices, and then salutes the grave, not unlike Solid Snake at the end of Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah, okay. So 2 things about this whole last scene which stick in my craw a little bit, one of which relates back to the very start of the film as well. But the other one is he says to his wife in his highly emotional moment, "Tell me I've been a good man. I've led a good life." And she looks at him like he's got fucking horns, rubs her hand down his chest and says, "Yeah, you've been all right," and walks off. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? You are clearly the good part of his life was not choosing the right person to marry, because she is a bitch. That one rubbed me the wrong way a lot. And then we go out on the same fluttering, desaturated American flag that we had just to open the film with. And I'm like, is that the message here? Is that what Spielberg's about? Rah, rah, America?
America, fuck yeah.
I have a very a range of emotions about that myself too, because obviously that flag means something a lot different than it did in 1998, and definitely means something a lot different than it did, in the 40s during World War II. And so that creates internal conflict to begin with me watching this now in 2024. But also, you're exactly right. It's like, that's like Sam Eagle type shit. Is that what you took away from this story? Is yay America?
I one of the reasons why I love the idea of having Paul on for this episode is because he is not American, and so I'm like, does it jolt you even more when the movie's
really
over
does.
and it just like, by the way, this adventure is sponsored by the United States of America. It is weird.
Pick up a pamphlet for the army in the lobby.
Yes. I think that Steven Spielberg, I mean, this is not the millionth time that this accusation has been lobbied at him. I was like, he lays it on a little too thick here at the end, because really you could have just cut the credits after he salutes the gravestone, and that is a much cleaner ending. It says everything it needs to say.
Wife could have hugged him.
Yeah, the wife could have hugged him. I think his family overall, they're kind of like a bunch of assholes though, because at the beginning of the movie, I don't know if you noticed, his son, I think it's his son, right? Is taking pictures. This poor man is like walking heavily, towards the grave of the man that saved his life, and his son is just, setting up his Instagram, and it's just really.
If it was made today, that little kid that's there would have his iPad with him.
Yeah.
Grandpa, you have no Riz. You'd say something stupid like that.
What, the Sigma?
One of the reviews I read about this did say that one of the endearing traits of Spielberg as a filmmaker that caused a downfall in some of his movies is that he does try to make things a little too accessible or a little too blatant. And obviously that works in things like E.T. and shit. But yeah, the closing stretch here, the last few minutes of the movie did leave me a bit confused.
That is the perfect place to be as we head into real talk, Alex, because now we can freely explore that confusion.
That went well. We didn't cross any lines, I don't think, there. Not that I worried we would, but when I was watching this movie, I was like, dude, this doesn't work for our formula in any way. So
It's hard. It was really hard finding things to pick on.
We did Beasts of No Nation. I knew that we could do this.
Oh, Jesus, I forgot about that. Good call. Yeah. All right, well, let's move it along to real talk.
All right.